Welcome everyone to another episode of the Straight Up Warlords. I am your implacable taskmaster, Jem, and with me is the mistress with the stubborn tenacity, Kat,
Hi everyone.
and the disgustingly resilient Diesel.
Hello there.
And this month we are going to be talking about the Deathguard,
Whee!
the Stinky Boys.
Visible excitement behind the screen. I love the sticky boys. I love depression.
Not all of them are depressed. Some of them have
Name
anxiety
one.
instead.
Well, it's important to remember that they're all about illness, and mental illness is definitely included. They are. I don't know. It's hard finding one that isn't depressed. Or maybe there's one or two that are more hateful or spiteful than depressed, but it really depends on how you take it, really.
Yeah.
But the Deathguard, the 14th Legion this time around, they are smelly boys. They fell to the plague god Nurgle, bless his grandfatherly soul. They're one of the legions that fell, but didn't. I guess quite a lot of legions didn't mean to fall, but their fall was particularly nasty. They didn't actually have a choice in it, and really still don't. Unlike a lot of other traitors, like a traitor can just say, "I'm gonna, stop sniffing the chaos source." They can go cold turkey if they desire it.
Yeah,
they absolutely can. Apart, the only ones that, other than the Deathguard, that can't do that are the Rubric Marines.
Yeah,
they're the sort of only two that are trapped.
Apart from, well, those and probably the 8-bound as well.
Oh yeah, the 8-bounders and maybe possessed as well. They've all sort of sniffed too much chaos glue, and they're way too far down the chain of mutations and stuff. But the Deathguard are most certainly bound to Nurgle. There is no choice for them to go, hey, I'm just going to quit Nurgle. I mean, the best they can really do is go, I'm going to be a Black Legionnaire. And that's sort of it. But yeah, they're very much under Nurgle's control. Because Mortarion, their Primarch, who is super badass, and I love him. He is hypocrisy manifested, and that's the whole reason I love him. Which is great. Basically, Big Daddy stole his kill. That's his law.
Very true.
Well, there's more. There is more to it.
There is more to it.
So the homeworld of originally Barbarous, which is Mortarion's home planet, and most of the old school Legion that is still around. There's a lot of old school Legion Plague Marines that are part of the original Deathguard that's still around. They mostly all hail from Barbarous, the original planet, which was an awful place. Basically was just filled with toxic gas clouds and things. So the higher up in your atmosphere you went, the more poisonous it was and more horrific. But this was sort of seems to be done deliberately, because there were the sort of masters, which we don't. GW doesn't ever tell you what they are. They're either sort of Xenos psychers or just heavily Nurgle psychers. I think it was revealed that they were just sort of heavily Nurgle influenced in a recent book. Maybe it's in Pale King.
I've always understood them as being Xenos, and we do know that there have been Xenos factions in other books that have been also heavily into chaos. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. I always had assumed that they were Xenos. However, I think it's a recent book, or maybe not too recent, but I think they came out with a book called The Pale King, which is Mortarion's Primarch book, basically. And it never straight up states, but it gives the impression that at least Mortarian's dad who is the most powerful overlord, was seemingly a human psyker that heavily felt a no.
Yeah.
So it's still a little bit up in the air what they are. But yeah, Mortarion landed there because, Chaos yeeted all the Brybucks. And he just didn't have a good time, let's face it. So this main overlord, his adopted father, and I use that very loosely, not really much of a father figure, more like a kidnapper.
Yeah. I mean,
basically.
Almost all of the traitor Primarchs. Actually, no, I was about to say something, but that's an entire lie. He was the only one that was really more kidnapped apart from Angron.
Yeah, Angron was definitely enslaved, yeah. Mortarion was pretty much enslaved as well. I mean, his adoptive grandfather, the overlord that ruled over him. Grandfather's noble. Yeah, but the overlord that found him, the most powerful overlord of this planet, sort of raised him to be a living weapon. Like he didn't treat him as a son or anything. He would almost give him horrific trials that would almost murder him every time. And then when Mortarion succeeded in these trials, because he's a Primarch, the guy was like, you fucking lived, did you? Nah, I'm not impressed. Here's another fucking trial, go do that. And it's just this constant death trials that he had to go into. And he was always kept basically as a slave. But yeah, he eventually accidentally found out that there were humans on the planet that live in the low valleys, that these overlords, who were, by the way, necromancers and that sort of thing, they were heavily into flesh mutations and stuff, making I assume chaos spawns and things, to literally release on the populace for shits and giggles because they were bored, and came down and enslaved them as well, and did all sorts of horrible things. But he found a human and was like, "Oh hey, you're me. You're the same race as me. So I'm going to rebel against my dad and save all of you, basically."
Yeah.
Which went reasonably well, actually. He did, and one of the first people he ever saved was a young child by the name of Typhon.
Yes.
Which, very important. We'll discuss him later. But Typhon was one of the very first to fight along Mortarion and his newly named army, the Deathguard. Because you have to have an edgy name when you're an edgy Primarch. That's just how it goes.
I was about to say I thought they were called the Death Shroud, but then I remembered that no, they were called the Death Guard.
No, Death Shroud is a unit. So his actual, the Legion, the 14th Legion was actually known as the Dusk Raiders. That's what they were before the Death Guard. But we get into that because they obviously meet back up with Big E, who then gives them the Dusk Raiders and stuff. But yeah, so he does go on to basically help the human populace overthrow these overlords one by one. They mount attacks. They raise an army. They do beat these overlords one by one until they're almost at the point of victory, where they're the only one that they haven't defeated is Mortarion's adopted father.
Yeah,
and he's sat on the highest mountain in the most toxic place where no one else can go. And basically Mortarion and all of his Deathguard men are discussing how they're going to get up there to beat the dude, because he's basically camping out in a toxic swamp, and they just cannot get anywhere near him without just dying horribly.
Yeah.
Or a man turns up. Well, he's a man. I think it's pretty well established he was a man at this point with the new books.
A man who glowed gold and wore gold armor. And
yeah, he had a real gold thing going on. I can't really say anything. Mortarion has a real green thing going on, so they're like colour palettes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Biggie comes down, is basically like, I think he's trying to do, in Biggie's defense, I guess he's like trying to do the Rust and Vulcan thing, where it's like, I challenge you to a thing, and if you can't do it, then no. Like as if it's like a friendly sort of wager.
Yeah.
Which might work with like Russ because he's a drunken barbarian and
Yeah.
that sort of thing, and it works with Vulcan because they basically have like this bonding moment during the challenge.
Yeah.
That doesn't work with Mortarion because it's a completely different fucking situation where he's like, dude, my people are dying. Like,
Yeah.
this is not like a time for like dick measuring.
It's also the fact that Russ and Vulcan at this point had pretty much taken control of the planets they lived on.
Yeah, exactly.
At least in some respect. Whereas Mortarion was like one battle away from it. And then Biggie turns up and just goes, hey,
it really. So when he comes to Russ and Vulcan, though, Biggie doesn't appear straight away as himself. He comes as like a traveler in disguise, basically, and then builds up sort of a rapport with them and this sort of thing. From what I've heard, he basically comes straight down to Mortari and goes, yo, I'm Big E. I'm your dad. I've got this space army. Nothing here matters, like he does to Angron. And Mortari and the Deathguard are just like, why would we believe you? Like, we don't know. You've just appeared out of nowhere, told us you're the emperor of all of our race, and that we have to be subjugated to you. Like, we have fought we've been enslaved basically all this time. We're not signing up for another person to subjugate us. That's not happening. Screw you. Like, they really didn't like any of it. And then Biggie's like, somehow, basically he's like, to Mortari, he's like, I'll make you a wager. If you can't go and beat your dad, then, and I can, you'll have to kneel before me.
Yeah.
Basically, which Mortari isn't happy about, but he's just like, okay, if he gets this guy by hair, whatever. Long story short, Mortari goes up to the highest peak and tries to fight his dad, but basically his dad just camps in his fortress and just lets the toxic poison almost kill Mortarion. And then when Mortarion's dying on the ground, instead of like coming out to challenge you in one-on-one combat, he walks out and stands over a dying Mortarion's like, ha, you're pathetic and whatever, you're a complete waste of my time this entire time. Nothing, like, just bragging all this time. And then, so, which, Mortarion's pretty angry about. This is his entire purpose from what he sees, is to overthrow this dude. This one guy is like everything. Everything he's fought towards, all the suffering that he's gone through and his people have gone through. And then Biggie just cuts him in half.
From my understanding, also Big E just teleports up there. There's no.
He doesn't go like, hey, Mortarion, none of these, your warriors can't make it up there. You know what I'll do? I'll help you kill him. That would have been like the route to go. The same with like Angron, like, I'll help you in this. It doesn't help him. It doesn't do anything like that. Just comes down, like, cuts the guy clean in half by just teleporting up there. It's like, I won the wager. You serve me now, as Mortarion's like dying.
It's almost as if when he was recruiting Mortarion, he was on a time crunch.
Which is so weird. I just don't understand Biggie's time crunch. Like, what is he? He's so like, I've got to do it now. Everything's got to happen now.
It's really weird with Biggie, talking about Biggie in general anyway, so.
Well, I think they've said now that Biggie foresaw the heresy, basically.
Yeah.
And he knew that the heresy was going to happen, but he didn't know who of the Primarch traitors there were. So there's a theory that he deliberately favoured some sons and not others so that he could, choose which ones were the traitors and the loyalists, which ones he had on his side, which is still a bit of a real fucked up thing, like like to your sons.
But the thing is, there is also some situations that were not in his control to do, like Fulgrim. He did somewhat favour Fulgrim, but it was
Yeah,
Fulgrim
to be fair,
touching a
Fulgrim's fault
funky
is his
sword.
own. Yeah, I mean, he had a bunch of slashy snake people.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, this sword seems fine." I mean, well, whatever, Fulgrim. I mean, Perturabo was never going to be on side with anyone.
Yeah.
Let's face it. But you could have done it with Angron easily.
Yeah.
The
only other thing I've heard is like, like the whole thing with Monarchia, where
oh yeah, could have
he
done that better.
could have done that, but also the reason that he chose the Ultramarines was to punish them as well.
Yes, but it got misinterpreted by the word bearers.
Oh yeah, it got misinterpreted by the word bearers. Yeah.
Real hate Ultramarine.
Yeah.
But then everyone hates word bearers. Like, yeah, everyone hates them. They're just too fanatical. They don't serve one god, and they're very backstabby.
Yeah.
Very backstabby. Which chaos. But so that's where Biggie comes down, cuts the Overlord in half, says, "Hey, Mortarion and the Deathguard, you will work for me now. You don't really have a choice in it. You're working for me." Mortarion, obviously, he's like, "Okay, you won the wage or whatever. I'll begrudgingly accept it." All a mundo, and he gets reintroduced to the Dusk Raiders, which is sort of the 14th Legion before he got a hold of it, which all come actually from, if memory serves, a place called Albion, which is actually the UK.
Yeah.
The Dusk Raiders are originally from the UK, which is pretty cool.
If I remember the map correctly, it's the UK, Iceland, and Greenland.
Oh, that's pretty dope. Okay.
Yeah, like those three nations sort of put together as Albion.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, but they're dope. I really like the Dusk Raiders actually. But Mortarion basically changes a lot of stuff with the Dusk Raiders. And he starts almost exclusively recruiting, instead of from Albion, from Barbarous.
Yeah.
And all his warriors that fought with him in the mortal Deathguard against the Overlords, they all take the Gene Seed and they all switch over to him as Space Marines, as his new Deathguard Legion. So a lot of Barbarous, well, pretty much all of Barbarous, considers Mortarion to be their savior. Like, literally, which he sort of is. He is literally their savior. He did.
He saved them from 99% of their problems, and the last problem, the saving was stolen from him.
Yeah, so they're much more Deathguard.
Let's be entirely honest, it definitely was stolen from him.
It definitely was, yeah. Like, if the Emperor could have handled it, you could have just helped him up the mountain, like, could have gone on the journey with him. Because the Emperor's not affected by the fog. Like, he's not affected by the poisons. And he could have helped him fight. He could have... There are cases of, like, in 40k of Psykers helping, like, loyalist Psykers using their psychic powers to help other Marines stand up against the toxins of Nurgle. Like, that's generally... It happens in Plague War. It can happen. The fact that he didn't use any of his immense psychic power to help Mortarion, like, at all, like, just to overcome and have a fair fight, seems a bit ridiculous.
It would be fair to say that also, at this point in Mortarion's life, he did hate Psykers because of his experiences with his adoptive father.
Yes, I was going to mention that. So... Obviously, the new Barbarous recruits come in and start replacing all the old Albion men. And it sort of creates a bit of a divide in the Legion. Not too badly, but it's more the doctrine changes Mortarion goes down. Because the Dusk Raiders were pretty honourable in terms of combat, well as the Deathguard almost... I mean, you sent them in to a planet where you didn't much care about the environment. Like, they were big fans of chemical warfare, like just Phosphex bombs, if they could be like burning someone alive, or just melting them with chemical warfare or just radioactive bombs, they were hardcore for it. They loved chemical war and like dirty warfare. But Mortarion's genes specifically helped his sons to endure more. Like, they were tankier. They could take a hit and just keep on going. They were just tougher than pretty much all of them. They were the tough legion. So that really helped them, and so they started taking up traditions of like real heavy infantry based tactics. So they run like tanks and stuff, but that's the reason you have like the Plague Burst Crawler, where it's a giant mortar tank that just sits at the back, because they don't like that sort of warfare of tanks going in. They prefer heavy infantry, so it's just a marine slog. Is basically what they like. Tons of marines, tons of terminators. That's what they love. They're well known for their Cataphracti Terminator armor, which I think is actually one of the best looking Terminator armor. Personally, probably biased, but it does look dope. I really like it.
Out of the 4 Terminator armor variants that there have been models for, one which doesn't have an official name, but everyone calls it the Saturnine. I will say that I personally think that the Cataphracti is the best looking.
Yeah, I love the Cataphracti. It's great. But yeah, the Deathguard do heavy infantry and chemical warfare. That's their whole go-to thing. And Mortarion, during the Great Crusade, was very like anti-tyrannical. He is actually like was very much for the people kind of guy. Like there's a famous incident, I think it's in Pale King, which again I've yet to read. He basically goes and attacks this planet that the Emperor hadn't given him the order to, go and subjugate them. He just went over there because it was I think it was like a system-wide empire, and it was just horrendous slavery. Like, it was just so bad. It was just, typical like aristocrats living in the hive cities, like all at the top, and everyone else was just like, it was bad though, like worse than the Imperium. It was real bad. Like, the slaves were just cattle, really. They literally were told to, like, I think they were even thrown against the Deathguard in some instances, like as literal meat waves that with just knives and stuff. So not great. They were pretty bad to their subjects. So Mortarion, being hating tyrants, famously was beating the shit out of them, and then they sent out a surrender notice, which he then said, "I am not accepting your surrender." And they said, "But we don't understand. We surrender." And he's like, "You're right. You have surrendered, and I'm not allowing it. I'm saying no. You have, like, the only chance I'm going to give you is the way in which you wish to die." Which is honestly pretty badass. I quite liked his Great Crusading, because it was pretty much like for the people, and he like saved most of the population and like literally butchered all the tyrants. I think the only problem was he didn't really have a plan for installing a government after that. So it was just a bunch of, millions upon millions of uneducated slaves doing nothing. No one was in charge. I guess he thought, administration's not my problem. So, which is a fair point. He's a space marine, not the, administrator. So,
I'm a liberator, not an administrator.
Yeah, exactly. So they did a lot of that during the Great Crusade. However, apart from the kill stealing, because the Deathguard fell traitor during the Horus Heresy, before they were subjugated by Nurgle.
Yes.
And the main reason for this is pretty much psychers. So obviously there was the Council of, is it the Council of Nicaea?
Yeah, it's a council of Nicaea. Yeah,
Yes,
but
everyone was talking about
then becomes
psykers.
the Edict of Nicaea. But yeah,
Yes, but one of the people, apart from Lehman Russ was also heavily pushing for control of psykers, like psykers be actually really controlled within the empire and really supervised and all this sort of stuff.
yeah. He was also saying that there shouldn't be any special psychic cores in the legions, despite the fact he had the Rune Priest. But
Yeah, he was a
Rune
massive
Priests are
hypocrite there.
different. The Rune
Yeah,
Priests are
they
different.
used the magic of Fenrir. It's fucking magic, my guy. It's the talking about
Yeah,
Mister. I'm gonna mutate my people into fucking werewolves, basically. Um, yeah, like he was sort of a hypocrite in that. Mortarion really did hate psykers, and so did all the barbarous Deathguard. So they actually didn't have that many psykers at all throughout their legion. There was a few of them, but most of them I think were Albion from the Dusk Raiders. There weren't a lot of or pretty much any barbarous psykers and librarians. So yeah, they were even his legion were massively against it, and which is understandable considering the whole people were subjugated by psykers. So
yeah,
it's understandable why they had such a passion of hatred. Um, so Horus basically understanding that Mortarion really doesn't like the Emperor anyway, does go to him and convinces him to join the traitors. It is worth noting that I believe Horus even said Mortarion was the hardest to persuade to become traitor. So, which is interesting.
to be fair, just before that moment when Horus starts trying to convert him over, the Emperor did somewhat side with Mortarion in the Edict of Nicaea.
Yes, he did. So
So
the Psyker problem was like sort of contained. However, I believe Horus was basically saying that the Emperor was a traitor, and well, he was like, oh, he's a traitor because he's now become a tyrant. Basically, that's how I think he got him in the end.
I think that's
that he's like, look at the Imperium, look at some of the planets we've been to, like look at like the people we've subjugated and things like this. This isn't all a good thing. Like this is definitely not like, look at the species we've wiped out. Especially like there were several species like that were lived in harmony with humans, and for that reason they were wiped out and things like that. Which obviously Mortarion isn't a massive fan of. So yeah, he does eventually join the traitors, and part of how this all happens as well is someone named First Captain Typhon.
Yeah.
So Typhon becomes the first captain, literally Mortarion's right-hand man. After being saved on Barbarous as a child. So he becomes the first captain, and he does a good job of it, to be fair. However, he is actually secretly a psyker. And he's been in contact with something in the warp for a very, very long time. Like since he was pretty much a child, someone has been talking to him.
I thought he was convinced by Erebus. Was he?
No, so he was, but I believe he's always had these whisperings.
Okay.
But he does finally get. He basically gets the big lore dump of chaos from Erebus, and this is also with the what are they called? The Space Marine sort of what are they called? What was it? The Warriors Lodge?
Oh yeah, the Warrior Lodges. Yeah.
Yeah, they start having the Warrior Lodges,
which are all set up by Erebus, and then the Emperor finds out
Yep.
about them and goes, no, we can't be having that. No, I do
Yeah,
want to
but
hear
that.
more about the warrior lodges actually, because
So the
of all the
warrior lodges are basically the idea that warriors from like different squads and stuff to go to these. So they're all in different squads. They're all they're not really anonymous. Well, they once you're there, it's sort of like a AA meeting where it's
yeah,
you can bitch and moan about what you dislike or how things. You can discuss how things are going. The
yeah,
way like you can speak your mind in them is the idea. It's wait for Marines to sort of vent their frustrations or things like this. And it's like you don't do it with your squad. You go to like several individuals from other squads that all meet up and speak, and everything in that lodge is supposed to be completely anonymous.
yeah.
You obviously know each other in that lodge, but it doesn't leave that lodge.
But it's also the
Um,
case that like at least in the Sons of Horus, when like a captain hears about something that's wrong, they can then act on it in a way that's then beneficial to the rest of the unit,
yep.
which is how like
How it was supposed
Fulgrim.
to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I do know that the Emperor's Children Lodge was very much based on rank, though.
oh, interesting. Okay.
It's in the Fulgrim
Um,
book. Uh, Fulgrim himself actually turns up to every lodge meeting.
oh, okay. Okay. I'm a bit like, ooh, if you had your Primarch stood over you, that's going to sway opinion, and it's
Yeah,
also going to, change how people can't speak freely if your
yeah,
Primarch's not
exactly.
stood there.
I think that
Um,
was part of the reason why Fulgrim turned up to do that.
yeah,
He wanted
basically,
to keep a tight control over it.
yeah. Mm. But yeah, the Warriors lodges are unfortunately misused by Erebus and Chaos worshippers to spread chaos worship. Um, there's not too much chaos worship of Nurgle through Deathguard actually, at all in the heresy. Typhon might turn one or two people, but it really isn't about that. It's about him turning everyone traitor rather than a actual heretic
Yeah,
and chaos worshipper. So which they do successfully do. So most of the Death Guard, well, pretty much all the people from Barbarous,
yeah,
the Dusk Raiders mostly are wiped out in the massacre. Was Esfand 3 or
yeah.
5?
So Isfan
Esfand 3.
3 was the atrocity, which was where Horus and his
They purged their
first
legions.
first three legions that joined him purged their legions, which
Yes.
is where we get some pretty baller lines from the Death Guard contingent in that book.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Garrow's
uh,
a
we,
badass.
we it's not actually Garrow that gives us the best line. It's a Contemptor Dreadnought who
Oh, that's the one that's been breached?
yeah, he
Yeah.
goes, we deny you this victory. This is the death that we choose.
Yeah, that's pretty baller. Yeah, I've heard that pretty baller. I've got to read so many books. I've got to do so much. Oh, life. But yeah, so most of the Albion, the Dusk Raiders, are unfortunately purged at the Purging of the Legions on Ishvan 3.
Yeah,
So all the loyalist elements of the Legion are pretty much cold, apart from Garrow, who yeets the fuck out of there by virus bombing his own ship. Uh,
but for some reason I don't understand why, but Mortarians seem to think that Garrow would turn against the Emperor.
which is really strange because I guess he thought he could turn him if he spoke to him, like personally.
Yeah,
But then if you just read like any book about Garrow or that Garrow's in, you're just like, how did he ever think this hardcore motherfucker was going to turn?
but
Like
to be fair, he
he
didn't
he
really.
basically told Dawn that he's a fucking idiot for not believing Mortarion to Dawn's face, and it enraged Dawn so much he almost killed him. And fucking Garrow was still absolutely calm, just going, "You're a dumb bitch." You're just like, what?
It's also that Garrow in his first book is starting to believe that the Emperor is a god, and then at the end of it, fully believes that.
Oh, does he? Fucking okay.
The fight of the Eisenstein has Garrow get confronted with the thought that maybe the Emperor is a god, and rather than just, well, he does start off thinking, well, yeah, religious something the Emperor frowns upon. But then he actually starts reading the Letitia Divinitatis, and then goes, you know what, this actually raises some good points.
Oh, everyone reads Lorgar's book and immediately becomes religious.
Yeah.
Oh, Lorgar, why? Well, we know why. You're an ass. The best troll I've ever seen in 40k is that goddamn book.
Yeah.
But yeah, so unfortunately they beat the everlasting shit out of their own loyalists and kill them all. So the Deathguard fully go traitor and join Horus. I'm not too up to date with what they generally get about to, like fighting wise in the heresy. I know that they obviously go and fight the White Scars at one point because Chagatai Khan has the best roast ever against Mortarion. Yeah, it's painful to say that as a lover of the Death Guard, but he does absolutely roast him.
I'll be honest, I think that's the only real major thing, that they are involved in other parts of the war. We know that the first Plague Marine actually was on the Eisenstein.
Yes, because he dies and then comes back, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's resurrected. He's the first Plague Marine, but he'd already died and been brought back by Nurgle. I don't know if he was he might have been one of the few that were actually a Nurgle worshipper, wasn't he? I believe.
I can't remember. The book is in my bookshelf behind a lot of games at the moment. So.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the first instance of an actual Plague Marine touched by Nurgle. But I'm pretty sure he doesn't last long and dies again. Yeah. Because Garrow is an absolute beast. Yeah, so I think they have some fights with the White Scars. They do other things they do partake a lot in the Horus Heresy. They are there doing a lot of stuff.
As I said before, it was both them and the Iron Warriors that hard carried the heresy.
Yeah, and then at the end of the main thing is they are there at the Siege of Terror, and they are actually alongside the Iron Warriors putting in a considerable amount of work. To be fair, while everyone else is doing drugs or murdering,
murdering everyone indiscriminately.
Looking at you, world eaters and Empress children.
Yeah.
Not pulling your weight. But yeah, I think if I'm right, the Siege of Terror, the Deathguard were trying to destroy the Astronomicon, I believe. They were physically sieging it. That was their task, I think.
If I remember correctly, their first success in the Siege of Terror was the Deathguard that took over the spaceport, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Which was why then, for the longest time, the traitors had a stronger foothold on Terror than people would have hoped for.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough.
And so then that was why when the Warhawk book happened, why Jagatai attacks the spaceport and then he goes one-on-one against Mortarion.
Oh, that's dope. Okay. They have a little showdown. That's cool. I have to read them. So many books to read. There's so many books, especially about the heresy. But I'm getting a bit ahead of ourselves. So on the way to Terra, to begin the siege, to join up with Horus and his boys, basically, Typhon, first captain, who has already fallen to Grandfather Nurgle, the demon god of plague, disease, and stagnation, murders all the navigators. He just straight up goes door to door and kills the navigators. Just executes them all. Without anyone stopping him, because no one else knows he's doing this. That's his grand plan. Mortarion certainly doesn't know. And ends up going, and Mortarion has him dragged before him, like, what the fuck was this about? Why? We can't even jump to Terra now. You've basically doomed the Crusade. The traitors are going to lose. The Loyalists are definitely going to win. Like, we cannot reinforce them. And Typhon basically says to him, oh, don't worry. I've been a psyker this entire time. I can navigate the warp to get us to Terra.
Yeah.
Which Mortarion is like, fuck you, dude. Like, I don't, like, you've not given me reason to mistrust you before, to be fair. Like, I've trusted you all this time. But there's also no evidence that those psychers that navigators were traitors. And you just went and killed them without telling me, which is a bit odd. So I don't know about this, but at the same time, we have to get to Terra. Like, that's the main.
It was very much a case of, you forced my hand, I have to trust that you will do this.
Yes, so he does, unfortunately, the Deathguard and Mortarion do take up Typhus's offer and allow him to navigate them to Terra, which he was sort of honest about. What he didn't tell everyone was that when they entered the warp, he jumped them into an area. It's not confirmed, but all they said was a area in the warp that is very strong with Nurgle corruption. I don't know if it was the Garden of Nurgle, but it was damn near close. It was bad.
It's implied that it's sort of Nurgle's part of the warp. So obviously, when we think about Nurgle's part of the warp, everyone thinks it's Nurgle's garden. So that's why pretty much everyone online who has discussed this before has basically said he dropped them all in Nurgle's garden.
Yes. Or at least it basically stank central, like, Jesus Christ. So it was pretty bad. So the Death Guard sort of were like, what the hell's going on? Unfortunately, they were immediately all hit by horrific diseases, which I think, I don't know if there's any media that really goes into, like, specific details of the fall of the Death Guard. I'm not sure. But basically, the first thing Mortarion does is cut Typhon in half, who now reveals himself to be not Typhon, but taking up the name of Typhus the Traveller, the mortal herald of Nurgle himself, and is granted the Destroyer Hive, which is a series of basically plague mosquito bugs that live inside him that he can psychically summon and control. So he's now a big walking fat hive of, like, toxic mosquitoes that are so potent they can kill space marines.
I love reading his part in the Plague Wars, where he goes about how he has to I say he has to control them. He enjoys the feeling of controlling over them, but he also enjoys when he just lets them do what they want.
Yeah, so the bugs. So when I say control, he has to control that they're not just unleashed constantly, because the bugs always want to come out and eat people. So he's like, no, I've got to keep them in. But yeah, he absolutely is a complete menace to society. He's evil Typhus, and betrays his entire legion to the Plague God. But the thing is with the fall. I don't think anyone takes into account, is when they're all infected with these various diseases and things, they're in Nurgle's realm. Nurgle messes with time a lot. but like not in a Zinchian way, in a very specific way, where he will literally, because he's the Lord of Stagnation, he will stagnate time, meaning he will slow time right down for you. He's also the god of rebirth, so if you die to those diseases, well, you don't.
Yeah.
So it's just a never-ending cycle of you like rotting away, chucking up from both ends, bleeding out of everywhere. It's just horrendous for everyone, and it's happening to everyone. The mortal crew, most of them probably die. To be honest, and even the Space Marines. And Mortarion does actually really care for his sons. This is the thing. So he sees his sons dying over and over again, and the same thing's affecting him, just to only a slightly lesser extent because he's a Primarch.
Yeah.
But yeah, he sees all his sons dying over and over again. And he's only really got one choice. He's stuck here. He doesn't have a navigator. He actually just cut Typhus in half, so he doesn't have a navigator.
Yeah.
The only one that could navigate him out of it is very much... Well, I believe Nurgle just brings him back, to be fair. But yeah, he's stuck in... And the rest of the Deathguard are stuck in a predicament. And this is the big turning point where Mortarion basically has no choice but to give up. He's forced to be subjugated to Nurgle to serve him. And this is like the pinnacle. Because how the Deathguard act from now on is they will always remember this moment. And it's a great moment. It's their greatest moment of shame. And so much is born from it. Like falling to Nurgle is their greatest driving point for the Deathguard.
Yeah.
It's from now on. It's spite against the Imperium, and pretty much everyone else. Not just because they're emperor worshipping idiots in the Deathguard's eyes. But because they were the Deathguard were the strongest, the toughest Marines. They were, they could take anything any other legion could be hit with and keep on going. Like they were so tough, and they were renowned for their toughness. Like they would drink poisons, just like ridiculous poisons that would even kill a Space Marine, just to prove like their strength and toughness, and in their endurance. However, they failed in their endurance, and they've now forcefully been subjugated, and everyone else now screaming at them that they're a horrific traitor and monster, and like, look at what you were, and all this, and they're like, fuck you. If you were in our position, you would have fallen much quicker than us. Like, you know what I mean? That's like, they're like, anyone would have fallen.
It's one of those things where, because of how Nurgle stagnated time, to everyone else it just seems like, oh, it took them like 2 seconds to fall. But in their perspective, it was like hundreds of years, wasn't it, or something like that?
It probably was, yes. So it's not like it was an instant fall. It was for everyone else, but for them, oh no, it's probably a long ass time.
Yeah.
And of just horrific mutation and torture. So they're sort of right. They're like, yeah, if any of you went through there was no way out.
No.
Like, and I think because Guilliman says in Plague War when he fights Mortarion, he's like, you failed the ultimate test when you were given a challenge. You submitted rather than died.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, Nurgle doesn't work like that.
It was one of those things where if you know the situation before you read the Plague War book, that it makes Guilliman look like an idiot. But then you have to then remember that Guilliman doesn't have the information that Mortarion has.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously wouldn't have that information because of the fact that any information that Mortarion would have had to hand over wouldn't be available to him because it's heresy.
Yeah, exactly. So
it would have been kept from him until that moment.
Yeah, so yeah, it's part of the reason why the Deathguard are so spiteful towards pretty much everybody else. But yeah, so they fall to Nurgle and they all become plague marines. They are but all incubators of disease, heavily mutated. They'll grow like tentacles next to their mouths, and demon faces will come out their armor and stuff like that. They look super cool. Um, but yeah, they can, unfortunately, now they're infected to such a degree, they can never not be Nurgle worshippers. They will, the moment they give up their faith in Nurgle, they will feel all the pain of what they are, and they will just die in agony. There is no,
Yeah.
and Nurgle already has their soul. Like, they've bartered their souls away, so it's not like they can become loyalist and just, be forgiven.
Yeah.
When they die, they still go back to Nurgle.
It's not like a member of the Deathguard can just become a Black Shield and just go to the Death Watch or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not how it works. They are trapped. They cannot be anything but what they are. And there's a great in the what is it called? The Lords of Silence novel. Vrorks, I think his name, Siege Master Vrorks. Great book, love it. So he is a great like internal monologue where he's like, I remember the day like we fell, and we all blame Typhus for it. Basically, we all hate Typhus for what he's made us, but we now all worship Nurgle, like unconditionally. Like the grandfather is the true god, and he's the true god because I have to believe it, not because like there aren't other gods or whatever. It's because he's like, well, I'm forced to do the things that I'm doing. Like, I don't have a choice in this, so I have to believe in him because the things I'm doing to other people are so absurdly horrible that he has to be right, because if he isn't, that's just too horrible for me to take. That's their sort of outlook. That's the depression that they're under. Like, we have to believe in Nurgle 100% because what he's making us do is so bad that I will go insane if I'm wrong. Which is such a chaosy twist to it all. Yeah. It's so great. But yeah, that's the fall of the Deathguard, and then it's just Siege of Terror doesn't go well for Horus, and they retreat. And then the Deathguard actually, unlike all the other legions, fall back very organized. Despite Blood Angels going on a massive tear. To be fair, let's face it, that was a big thing in the Siege of Terror. But yeah, they fall back relatively well, actually. They fall back all in formation, and the whole Legion gets out of there as one, covering each other like as they get out of there. And so the majority of the Plague Marines on the Siege of Terror get out of there. They're fine. Like a lot of the other traitor legions are run down and killed.
Yeah.
So they
a lot of the other ones do sort of like break.
Yeah, they break and flee, well as the Deathguard strategically fall back. Like one group falls back while another group is covering, then the first group covers them as they fall back, and it's that slow, methodic, organized retreat rather than this actual rout and break.
Yeah,
which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, but they get the hell out of there. The Imperium, obviously being the Imperium, blows up Barbarous like immediately. They're like, nope, nuke. So they blow that up.
I think in new lore, Barbarous was actually destroyed before the end of the Siege of Terror.
Oh, is it? That's interesting.
Because the Lion, while still stuck on the other side of the Ruin Storm, decided to just go around all of the traitor homeworlds and exterminatus them.
Oh, because in Lord of Silence, they make it seem like, because when they fell back, there is one of their oldest members, he takes his warband. This is a separate warband, but he takes it and goes back to Barbarous while everyone else is retreating to the Eye of Terror. And I think he gets like a staff or something from like an actual, like one of the natural or the biggest tree on Barbarous, and he like snaps a branch off and has it as a staff. And they're like, everyone's like, that is like one of the most sacred relics ever, because it's like one of the only things that's ever been recovered from Barbarous before boom.
Yeah, I assume that either when he travelled through the warp, he also travelled through time, which does happen a lot in the 40k, or that was written before the whole lion went around and started blowing stuff up, and they didn't think of that bit when they were talking about the lion. So
yeah, because there's a lot of retconning and things.
The lion stuff is like within the last few years.
Yeah, I think Lords of Silence was an 8th edition thing to introduce people to Deathguard.
Yeah.
So
yeah, whereas the lion, all the stuff about the lion going around the crater homeworld and blowing them up was a Horus Heresy 2.0 thing, which is obviously during 9th edition.
Yeah. So yeah, it's they change stuff all the time. Yeah. Just look at the was it the Indomitus Crusade?
Oh yeah.
Did they change the entire timeline on that, like pretty much immediately?
It's been 112 years. Actually, it's only been 12.
Yeah, well, forget the 100. I did all this in 12 years. Everyone's like, okay, all right. Kind of pulled that out of your ass, but okay. Yeah, so the Deathguard, they are still doing stuff. It's mostly been separate warbands, like just Deathguard going off solo and trying to spread Nurgle's influence on their own, while the Legion itself has mainly stayed in the Eye of Terror in what they now called the Plague Planet, which is a reimagined Barbarous, basically.
Yeah.
It's a demon world that they've made in Nurgle's sphere of influence in the Warp. They mostly stay there, gathering strength, beating the shit out of Tzeentch and Khorne and Slaanesh in the Great Game. They mostly have been playing the Great Game all this time, to be quite honest. There are a few things, they've done a few things here and there in the material plane, but mostly their warbands go out to like get supplies or recruit new people, that sort of thing. Speaking of recruitment, the Deathguard mostly recruit, because they're so mutated, their gene seed is so bad, they can't store gene seed because Nurgle corrupts it so quickly. They're mostly recruited from loyalist Marines now, where they basically capture Marines and or other Heretic Marines, and they just dump a load of Nurgle based diseases into them until they submit and come over to Nurgle. They basically give everyone the same treatment that happened at their fall, and are often proven correct that no one else can also endure the things that have been done to them. I mean, there's probably one or two, but the Plague Marines do take a sadistic glee in watching someone fall to Nurgle. Like, they will sit there and watch the diseases and maladies take over and know that they will fall, and they're pretty smug about it in the moment.
I mean, you would be, wouldn't you?
Exactly. However, that Marine that then falls is then actually welcomed as a brother, and they're honestly pretty chill with everybody. The Deathguard they're a legion and everything. They're still within, probably tens of thousands of Plague Marines easily. But they're all pretty chill with each other. There's not too much backstabbery like you would get with a lot of other cows. There's a bit, but it's not that bad. All the Barbaran people that are still survived from the heresy. They're all still there. They're all in top command positions, doing their own thing, leading their own warbands. So it's honestly pretty chill. Yeah, and that's sort of what they've been doing for 10,000 years, is just playing the great game. And then Mortarion has now fallen to Nurgle, become a demon Primarch, and has also become a Psyker because he's now part demon. Which has
I think he was always capable of being a Psyker, but he always denied that part of himself until he was taken until he fell to Nurgle.
Interesting.
Because
maybe just suppressed it so heavily, because I've never heard mention of him pre-heresy being psychic.
It's always been implied that all of them are capable of psychic powers, but some of them denied it, and the others just aren't aware of it. Like Guess
Gilliman being a prime example.
Yeah, Gilliman being a prime example. He isn't really aware of just how powerful he could be.
Yeah.
So like,
because his presence in the warp is still pretty huge.
Yeah, and like he is capable. He would be capable of doing many psychic things. The only times he's able to actually pull it off is when he's possessed by the Emperor, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so the Deathguard, they're cool. I really like them. They're like super cool. Zombie plagues and demon engines of just spit, like the bloat drones that just spit a load of caustic slime over people and we watch people melt. Tons of zombies. One thing I would really like more, I guess they can't for in-game balance, but in the tabletop, I really wish they were able to like merge and or ally with demons easier. Nurgle demons, because if I remember rightly, what really annoyed me in the 8th edition Codex when it came out, they had Plague Bearers as a data sheet in the Deathguard. You couldn't run them, as you had to do it as soup. You couldn't run a Deathguard list and have them. So you're like, well, why are the Plague Bearers in there then? It was really weird. It's still sort of really weird, because now with 10th edition rules, you can only have 500 points, I think, of allies. So you can only run a little bit. But yeah, because when the Death Guard show up, it's heavy infantry and Plague Marines, sure, but it's also like tons of Poxwalkers and demons, like especially Plague Bearers and Nurglings and flies and things. So they're very, very like should be sort of side by side with demons.
Yeah.
With
I do believe that at the end of 9th edition, when the Chaos Demons book came out, that there were rules in that for implementing demons into other Chaos forces.
Oh, were there? I never read the Demon Codex.
But because it was in the Demon Codex, and unless you were going out of your way to find out what was in it, not a lot of people knew about it, and to be honest, not a lot of people would have used it anyway, because
it would have been hard because of how the detachment rules work.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you'd have to like have a battalion of is it battalion? I think of like Plague Marines and of Death Guard, and then like try and have like an infantry patrol or something. It would have still been annoying to try and do. Doable, but it would have been annoying to try and set that up.
Yeah.
With how I like how streamlined it is in 10th. Like 10th army building is very streamlined.
Yeah.
Which I think is fine.
There's not as many hard rules on it as well. Like you have your detachments, but there's no like you have to have this, and this. It's just you have to have a leader that is your warlord, and then you can fill out the rest of the points. You can only have this many of
literally have. So how it works is you literally just need a warlord. You do character as your warlord. That's it. And the only other thing is every other like unit is limited to 3 of that unit, unless it's battle line, which then can take 6. Yeah. That's the only rules. And then you get into transports as well, and you can have as many transports as you have battle line units.
Yeah.
But that's the rules of like you take whatever you want. limits 3. That's it. Have a warlord done. So it's quite easy. It's quite nice to build. I'll give it that. There's still a little bit of tinkering needs going on, but it's not in the worst place. I'm just having trouble because I've never rolled so badly as I've done in 10th edition. It's just my rolls. I hit 3s. I held 3s and mostly wounded 3s. 1s and 2s, baby. 1s and 2s.
1s and 2s.
Oh, it's horrendous. It's so bad. Yeah, well, Deathguard. That's generally the gist of them. They're very they wear their name on the sleeve. They're just tons of toxins, tons of just infantry. There's, I think, half the roster for Deathguard is characters. Because you have like specialists, which are just plague marines that do certain things, like plague marine characters that do certain things. You have like the tallyman. Tallymans are like basically they sort of like look at numbers of like people dying, like enemies killed, plague marines killed, how many diseases there are, how many even how many bullets have been expended, and try to figure out numerically by using the number 7, which is Noble's number, to figure out like omens and like predictions of how the future's going to go, or if they're blessed, or whether this is the right course of action because 7s keep popping up, that sort of thing. And they also are sort of the gatekeepers to a lot of the more nastier weapons. So like Tallyman sort of know where, well, they're in charge of like the more dangerous sort of weapons, like the Phosphorex bombs and all that sort of stuff. They're in charge of like keeping them safe for a rainy day in their workshops. I think they're also, Mortarion also tells specifically Tallymen, because they're basically like the priests or the chaplains of Space Marines, of Death Guard for Nurgle. He specifically tells them like where they're the ones that are allowed to know where like the actual Death Guard Legion stocks are, like where all the weapon stocks are stored on certain planets and certain worlds. Nobody, they have access to it, so they're quite important and interesting, actually.
Yeah.
You have foul blight spawns, which are basically the guys that just love making chemicals. Like, they're pretty scary. They just spray stuff with loads of just, plague, grime, and Nurgle blessed filth from tubes, and it just melts people. They're also really good at like sieging stuff. The one in Lords of Silence literally gets all of his cultists to take like what they call squeegees. Yeah, he takes squeegees, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to go around all the decks of our entire ship and squeegee all the gunk and filth off the floor into like a giant vat, and we're gonna spray it at this fortification and see what happens." And honestly, it just melts through everything.
Yeah.
It's so funny. But yeah, they're just like the chemical warfare experts. Who else you got? Your plague surgeons, pretty straightforward. They're the medics of the things. So they just go around. They're the apothecaries of plague marines. They're pretty cool. I quite like them. They heal stuff, make people tankier. Who else you got? And then, you've got the biologist putrefier. Basically explosive ordnance expert he loves making death's heads, which are severed heads of the Death Guard's enemies that they're almost like shrunken heads, but not shrunken. They're just regular sized heads. They just look small because a marine's holding them.
Yeah.
And they stuff them filled with like chemical filth and just lob them at the enemy to explode like filth grenades.
Yeah.
They just love blowing stuff up with really nasty weaponry. They're also pretty cool. They're just heavy ordnance dudes. And then you have a load of demon engines that are just so the Death Guard don't really the whole shtick is not maintaining vehicles or technology at all. Their technology through Nurgle's corruption becomes very much a living thing. They've lost a lot of knowledge on how to maintain stuff and things of that nature. That's why they're mostly always raiding to try and get new like rhinos and things.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're basically their own tanks now instead of making like predator tanks and things. The Plague Burst Crawler, they sort of bash it into the right sort of shape and then do the whole almost like Iron Warriors thing, except it's not, you know, a trap for the demon. It is generally an offering for a Nurgle demon, and they will stick demons in demon engines and things. Obviously, all Nurgle based demons, but they'll place them in demon engines and have their own demon engines, which are really quite cool. I wish they had a slightly few more interesting demon engines for specific things. But yeah, that's sort of the Deathguard. They go around punching things. I suppose since we are getting a little bit on, do you want me to talk about what is coming to the Crusade that I'm bringing?
Yeah, I would like to hear about the Crusade force you're going to bring.
Okay, so my Crusade force is called. It's a war band called the Fetid Omen. They are a part of the 4th Plague Company, because which I believe there are 7, because of course they are, because 7's Nurgle's number. They're called Plague Companies or Vectorums. I think Vectorums is their official name. But yeah, they're part of the 4th, which is all primarily Sorcerer and Psyker based. So they're actually pretty despised by a lot of the other Deathguard, because even now the Deathguard don't particularly like sorcerers, even though they have much more leeway with them now. They're all Nurgle based, but even Mortarion, who is a Psyker, still professes to hate Psykers. He still thinks it's unpure, but Mortarion's interesting now, and the reason he's such a hypocrite is because he is part Nurgle demon. So it's sort of like two sides. It's his old self and then the Nurgle side, having different opinions all the time. It's quite interesting.
He does have a slightly different outlook on it, but literally the only difference is if they're doing Nurgle stuff, it's fine, but anything else.
Yeah. So it's hypocritical, but it's because he's tainted and corrupted and can't really, there's a lot of stuff like he has become ironically everything he hated.
It's one of those things where it's, you can say it's hypocritical, which it kind of is, but at least he's more consistent than even Ross was.
Yeah, exactly. It did. To be fair, he wasn't too much of a hypocrite until he became a demon.
Yeah.
Which is again the very thing he hates. So, yeah. But yeah, the 4th Plague Company the Plague Company itself is called the Wretched. But yeah, very heavily Psyker based. They are led by a man called Viros Vol, who is I believe I'm running him as a Sorcerer Lord in Terminator armor, because Deathguard don't have their own Sorcerer Lord. I'm sure that's probably coming when our Codex eventually comes out. Don't have any unique ones, so I have to use the Chaos model, unfortunately, the normal just Chaos Sorcerer Lord. But, imagine he's in Cataphractic, because he would be. Just imagine he's more Deathguard-y than the model looks.
I'm sure there's probably a way to kit bash something up if you were looking to do that.
Probably. I may. Or maybe you could take a Death Shroud and then give it like a Sorcerer Head or something. I'd have to have a look.
Sorcerer Head, maybe give one of the hands a staff.
Yeah, instead of it'd be interesting. The thing is, I think if you look at the Malignant Plaguecaster, which is actually the Plague Sorcerer model that is unique to the Deathguard, that looks like how I feel the Sorcerers should do. So they shouldn't have like the big helm on like a lot of the other Sorcerers do. It's like the Death Shroud cloak they've got on. They've still got that sort of hood, that purple hood. And then I feel like they should have because the sorcerer has like a gnarled wooden staff, which is very like Nurgle sorcerer like, which I would love to stick on a sorcerer lord as a model. I'd have to see. Maybe some people have done conversions. So I'd have to take a look. But yeah, Viros has been a warlord and commander for a long time. He was one of the original Marines from Barbaros. He survived the Great Crusade. He survived the Heresy and was at the Siege of Terror and fell back and all that. So he's been alive for a long ass time. Especially since he's probably chilled out in Nurgle's realm, so he's probably older than that, and just doesn't realise it. But yeah, he's been lived for a long, long time, and he's a very powerful sorcerer lord that leads the Fetid Omen. You have Slight, who is the tallyman for the Fetid Omen. Yeah, he's the tallyman. He chills out. He reads the omens and things, as I've explained. He's I haven't got much lore for him. Yeah, maybe I'll think of something. But yeah, he's just sort of the tallyman that chills out. That I put in because tallymans are pretty good on the tabletop, and they're also very cheap. So I was like, yeah, I've got 45 points. Stick him in. Yep. Then I don't actually have him in my army at the moment, but this is a character that's very near and dear to my heart because he was my warlord in 9th edition when I did Crusade.
Oh, nice.
Back then, you had your own different plague companies, and also the psychic phase was completely different. So he was really good. Vomitus Spuke is his name. He is a malignant plague caster. He's the apprentice to Virus Vol. So he's like the second in command. He's this like apprentice sorcerer. However, he's sort of new compared to the others who are all Barbaros based. Slight and Viros is obviously Barbaros based, but Vomitus is not. He's actually sort of like only maybe 1,000 years old. So he's actually pretty new. Is it young and up and comer? Very powerful psyker. So he was born a psyker on like a hive world, and obviously tried his best to avoid the black ships and all of that. I mean, nonsense.
They all try their best.
Exactly, except he was successful because he found a group of people, which turned out to be a Nurgle cult, that could get him off world, which they did. And joined this cult and fell deeper and deeper into Nurgle's embrace as a way to escape the fate of most psychers, which is being battery farmed to the Astronomicon and the Emperor. So he very much hates the Emperor Imperium for all the witch hunting and things that he had to go through as a kid and all that sort of stuff. And he's embraced the plague god willingly, unlike a lot of all the others on his ship, or most of the others. But he is also maybe has ambitions above his station. So, I thought I'd have like a little bit of a, chaos backstabby in there where as we play through the campaign, maybe Vomitus will make some moves and we'll have to have a little see how it goes for him. But yeah, he has ideas to take over from Viros's position. So a little bit of interesting leaders backstabbing each other, which is all chaos is about. Chaos. So yeah, I have obviously Viros as Deathguard Sorcerer in Terminator armor. I've got a Tallyman. I have 3 units of 7 Plague Marines, because of course I do. 5 Blightlord Terminators. I've got a group of Deathshroud Terminators. They're obviously, I felt like Deathshroud, they're good on tabletop, but also, it's great to include them because Deathshroud are Mortarian's eyes and ears throughout the Legion. Yeah. They're his hand-trained bodyguards that, help potentially blessed and useful agents of Mortarion, or can quickly, behead traitors if they feel the need. So it makes sense that there's lots of them sent to the Sorcerer Plague Company that Mortarion so decides.
Yeah.
And then lastly finished off by a Fetid Bloat Drone and a Mephitic Blight Hauler as just a couple of cheap demon engines, because this is a 1,000-point list. Plus, we're only running 500-point games to begin with, so it's just easier to fit in smaller pointed models as things. So yeah, that's the list at the moment. A very small warband, as Viros has been defending whatever planet we decide to be on. We'll make up from the. He's been fighting Tzeentch, which is what the 4th Plague Company actually specializes in, is counter psychering with their own plague psychers. So they've fought off Tzeentch and all the other demons on this planet, and some old friends, and some long-term enemies, the Iron Warriors and the Imperium, have turned up at the worst time possible, because of course it is. It can never be a good time in 40k. It's got to be the worst time. So always. So the Deathguard have literally just spent most of their resources, and the warband is, just got out of this war with Tzeentch demons and has really struggled. Probably lost quite a few of it, much of its strength, and is just recuperating and trying to rebuild. And suddenly they have reports of, demon engines made of pure iron and guns, blades, appearing on their lands, and some Imperial dogs have got the flamers out and have started burning away Nurgle's garden that they've made on this plague planet. And they are furious, under strength, but furious, and they must somehow retaliate against the intruders to Nurgle's realm and defend the plague planet once again from 2 opposing factions. But with faith in the plague god, anything's possible. And that's what I've got so far for my faction. As we will see how they do. Also brought a Tallyman because they give +1 to hit, and I roll nothing but 2s and 1s, so I might actually hit something with that round. That might help me out. But yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. I've enjoyed them a great deal.
That's good
so far. The intent that I'm finding a bit intense. They're not anywhere near as tough. As unfortunately they've changed quite a bit. Play style, which is a little unfortunate. They don't take a punch anymore, which is really not in theme with their lore. So they do a little bit more damage output now. A little bit more. I don't think they're fantastic, but they're all right. They're reasonably balanced actually compared to all the shenanigans that have gone on throughout 10th edition so far. So yeah, they're a sort of decent place.
Nice.
And you can how you run them is you can basically at the beginning of the game now choose which plague you want to unleash, which is pretty cool. So you can choose from giving a -1 to enemy armor saves if they're in contagion range. This is on top of -1 toughness. They still just do that flat out.
Oh yeah.
But you can give them -1 armor save. You can give them -1 leadership and -1 OC. OC is now as objective control instead of you still have to count all your bloody models and see how many models you had compared to the enemy, who was infantry based and all this. Now it's just a number. So you -1 to that number, which is pretty good. -1 to leadership is okay as well, but there are ways in Deathguard to boost that, and it's kind of the most broken way to play them. So I haven't run it that way. Basically, you can take the Noxious Blightbringer, which is the bell dude. He's got a big bell on his back, and he gives an extra -2 if you're in his contagion range. So you can have -3 leadership, which is a little crazy considering that's like better than Night Lords and Drukhari. You're like, So no one can. Basically, you can just make someone not score anything, which is kind of strong. If you run them that way. Or I think what was the last one? -1. Oh, a -1 to your weapon skill and ballistic skill, which is
Ooh,
pretty good. So,
that
but
is
because
painful.
it's -1 to your. It's not -1 to hit. It's -1 to weapons and ballistic. It's -1 to your profile. So
Yeah,
you can stack it with a -1 to hit,
yeah.
basically making you -2 to hit, which is insane.
Basically turning a space marine into an orc.
Yeah, which is great. Well, it's in your contagion range, so you still have to be within like
Yeah.
9 inches. But yeah, you absolutely can do that, which is kind of insane. To to make it's funny because I've been against Tau players and I've done that. So I'm like, I got into melee and I'm like, "What's your Riptide hitting on? Sixes?" It's like, oh, go ahead, mate. Go ahead, fire sixes at me. It's quite funny. But yeah, that's what I've got so far, and I'm coming at you. Hopefully, maybe, or I'm going to get eaten alive by a mauler fiend.
I mean, it's more we're going at you, but you're ready for
I don't know if I am. I've just
it.
been fighting. I've just done fighting Zeech, and then two more things have turned up. Like, oh no, it's getting any worse. But we've got home turf advantage, so there's that.
You never know, the Tyranids might turn up as well.
I can beat them. I can beat the Tyranids. They can't eat me. They get sick if they eat me.
I mean, there was one Tyranid hive fleet that has evolved to be able to eat warp entities.
Yes, there has. So that'd be interesting. But there was, I don't think it was that specific hive fleet, but another one did try to, in recent Deathguard lore actually, they picked a fight with Deathguard on a plague planet, and I find it really weird that they ground the Deathguard down in a war of attrition, which seems an oxymoron, since a war of attrition is what the Deathguard do.
Yeah,
But I guess it makes sense with how many Tyranids there are.
yeah,
But so the Death Guard eventually fell back. So it originally seemed like a defeat for the Death Guard, and then the Tyranids tried to harvest the planet, and it went really badly real quick. Like they all
yeah,
like the ship that was harvesting got incredibly sick, bloated, and was dying, and was like then tried. It was almost spreading and infecting all the other ships. So all the other ships literally just opened fire on it, and blew it up, and was
yeah.
like, "Yeah, we're not doing this again." And then they just left. So then the Death Guard came back as if nothing had happened. So no one got anywhere,
Yeah.
which is quite funny. But
Unless
yeah.
anybody's got any questions,
Nope, I don't.
then I think we shall call it there then.
Okie dokie.
So yeah, that has been the Straight Up Warlords on Deathguard. We actually stuck mostly on topic this time,
Which is unheard of.
and it didn't take us 4 hours to get through the episode as well.
To be fair with your one, we did go through like all the traitor legions.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, so I just had the one legion to go through.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I would like to thank everyone for listening to this. And I've been Jem, and I've been here with Kat
Night, guys.
and Diesel.
see you later, guys.